Hello everyone, today we're going to be focusing on the mathematics topic of reading timetables. So reading timetables is one of those elements of maths that people can get a bit confused with because of the way things are laid out. However, generally speaking, once you're able to get past that element of understanding the layout of a timetable, what we're essentially dealing with is time problems. And as long as you know how to find the differences between certain times, you're essentially set for being able to do all of these. So let's have a look at an example question. So in this question, we've been given part of a railway timetable. Something I want to mention immediately in relation to this is people quite often get confused about what these 4-digit numbers mean. What this actually means is that we're looking at 10:30 as the time. Just timetables don't tend to print the full stop or the comma that's in the middle of this time. It puts a gap there instead. So if you're ever worried about reading this and wondering what these 4 numbers mean, it literally just means that this is 10:30, this would be 11:30, 12:35, and so on and so on and so on. Timetables also, generally speaking, tend to use the 24-hour clock. So we'll go on to 13:25 rather than 1:25 p.m. as an example. Okay, so with that in mind and having just mentioned this little section here, what I'd like you all to do is pause the video and write down any other ideas you have for things you need to understand in order to read a timetable and in order to solve these questions. Give yourselves 1 minute to do that. Off you go. All right, so let's have a look at the ideas I came up with in order to solve these questions then. So I was thinking that we might need to understand how to measure time. So we're thinking about understanding the relationship between hours and minutes. So I know that there are 24 hours in a day, and I know that there are 60 minutes in each hour, which brings me into my time conversions here. I think I need to understand how to read a timetable. So that not only involves being able to understand that 1030 means 10:30, but also understanding what the rows and columns in a timetable mean. So each row tells me when a bus or a train or what have you arrives at each of these different places. So for instance, for the railway timetable for London King's Cross, a train arrives at 10:30, at 11:30, at 12:35, at 13:25, and at 14:30. The columns tell me where every single train stops on the timetable. So if I've got train number 1, it goes to King's Cross at 10:30, it goes to Peterborough at 11:24, and it goes to Newcastle at 13:36. Train number 2, going down here, goes to the exact same places, King's Cross, Peterborough, and Newcastle, and these are the different times that it arrives at each of those locations. Sometimes you might see a timetable where one of the squares has been left blank or where it's been filled in. So for instance, say that this square for Peterborough here was blank. That would just mean that that train goes to King's Cross, it does not stop at Peterborough, and then its next stop is at Newcastle. Okay. Once I've understood all of this, the final thing I essentially need to understand is differences in times, and in order to do that, I'll need to use some addition and some subtraction. So with that in mind then, what I'd like you to do is use the rucksack method to see if you can solve the questions that we've been given for part A and part B here. There's a few different ways you could solve these, but I'll go through my workings with you in a moment. Can you pause the video here, please, and have a go, and then we'll compare our answers. So hopefully you were able to get at least some workings on the page for this one. Even if you're only able to solve the first bit of a question, you can still get points for that if it's a right-in answer rather than a multiple choice. So that's something that's always really worthwhile bearing in mind. So we've read the question. We've understood what we need to do. We now need to choose what kind of methods we need in order to solve this. So here's the workings I did. So I used a timetable method for section A here because I need to know how long the 11:30 train takes to get from London to Peterborough. So I know I'm looking at London to begin with, so I'm going to read across in order to find the 11:30 train. And something I always find really useful here is to circle it or to put some kind of mark on here so I know which train I'm looking at. And I need to know how long it takes to get to Peterborough. So I'll read down from the Peterborough line, make sure I'm in the same column, and I'll circle this one as well. So I need to find the difference here. I've used the timeline method in order to do this. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds, see if you can work out what the missing numbers are in these places where I've left the blanks for section A here. So hopefully you've now unpaused the video if you were pausing that. With the timeline method, this basically breaks up the amount of time between each of the hours and the minutes we're given. So I go from 11:30 to the next hour, which I know is 12 o'clock. So I need to know that this is the difference between 11:30 and 12, which is going to be 30 minutes. I then go from 12 o'clock, my hour, on to the next time that we have, which is 12:35. And as I've already written down here, I've got 35 minutes. If I add this up, that means I get 65 minutes as a result. Some questions ask you to give your answer in hours, but this particular one, if we read back through and check, asks us for our answer in minutes. So I would just write 65 minutes on my dotted line over here. So for question B, have a look at my workings, see if you can work out what the missing numbers are, and have a think about what your answer would be for this. Give yourselves 1 minute to have a go at that. So I'm looking back through my question thinking, well, Anja needs to be in Newcastle by 1500 hours or 3 p.m. So what I'm going to do is have a look down the bottom here and see which trains would get her into Newcastle before 3 o'clock. This means that these last 3 trains aren't going to be any good for her, but 13:36 and 14:58 could be good ones to go for. Now, if I read back up the timetable to find out which train she's getting from London, I can see that the 13:36 leaves from London at 10:30, and I can see that the 14:58 leaves London at 11:30, which would be how I'd write my working in over here. So which one do we want to get? This is a bit of an interesting one because it asks you to give your reason. Either one would technically be accurate here. What I would say is potentially the 10:30 train would be better at this point, because arriving in Newcastle for her important meeting at 14:58, which is only 2 minutes before 3 o'clock, isn't going to give her very much time to get to her meeting. As a result, getting the 10:30 train is probably going to be a better result here, so that Anja has time to get to her meeting from the train station. You could potentially have given a different answer, and as long as you've given a reasonable, sensible answer, then you're going to get the 2 marks in this case. Some questions word this a little bit differently. So for instance, if you see anything that asks you for the last train that she could get if she wants to be in Newcastle at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 1500 hours, then you might go for the 11:30 train because that's the last possible one she could get. Because this question doesn't ask you for the last possible train, either would be a sensible answer, and 10:30 would potentially be slightly more sensible because she gets that extra travel time. So I hope that's been helpful for you with a bit of practice reading timetables and solving these sorts of questions. You could have a go at some of these by yourselves by maybe going through your bond books or any other resources you have access to. Good luck with that, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye!